So the minimal reproducible example in simple terms is send people the minimum number of data as well as code so they're able to reproduce the error on their side so they can help you better to troubleshoot your code. So that's basically it, but if you wish to know more and the context of it, you can watch the rest of the video. So that often I send codes like this saying that there's an error in their code and they don't know what happened. And first of all, I love to help with all the troubleshooting, but it's really hard to understand what's wrong looking at something like this where you say object of S4 is not sustainable, or they just say cannot open the connection even though their internet connection is fine. How about no self found inside the subset command? Or how about what's there's no requested variable found in the object, even though they can swear on their life that this 4 gene is going to be expressed on their dataset, and they don't know how to do that. So I'm going to show you the solution at the end of the video, but let me just talk more about why is it impossible to actually troubleshoot all this code. So first of all, I used a PBMC object over here. So if you understand PBMC object and Sura object, you more or less can understand how to troubleshoot those code. But if I substitute these PBMCs to some other variable such as VAR, RGS, or some other random name that I do not actually see before, I wouldn't be able to troubleshoot all this code. So it's more or less like troubleshooting what's wrong with your car. You can't start the engine, there's some noise, and you try to video call me or audio call me over bad internet. It's really hard to understand like what's the car that you have and what's the problem. So I could say there's no gasoline and you tell me you drive a Tesla. That wouldn't make any sense. Okay, so how should a minimal reproducer example? First of all, it should be as minimal as you can be, as little code as possible. If you can make it in 2 lines, don't make it in 10. It should be complete so that when you run the whole thing, it shouldn't say that this object not found. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, right? And it should be reproducible, not just in your computer, but other people's computer. So best way, if you have 2 computers, try to reproduce that in a different computer or different environment or different R like versions and something like that to make sure those are reproducible on other computer. Otherwise, when you send to others and you get a different code, there's a problem. So there are 3 main steps of creating a minimal reproducible example. I've been very good in saying that for many times now. So first of all is not really part of the example, but every time you need troubleshooting, make sure to give people your session info as well as your current work directory, right? The session info will give people like the R version we're using, the library that you're using, what version Reticulate and Python you're using, and Keras and so on, so that people are able to understand like TensorFlow 1.9 and 2.1 works drastically differently from each other with their code structure and syntax. And the current work directory will understand, for example, do you have write access on that certain folder or not? So if you are loading the work directory inside your desktop, you should be fine because you don't have much like restriction and permission from Windows. But if you're running the things inside, for example, a system folder or Windows like system32 folder, and it's likely will not have write access, so you won't be able to access those folder. So these 2 things will be extremely important for anyone to do the troubleshooting. So step 2 is the data, where you need to load the data either into a CSV file if you can. If it's a simple table, you can load it into a CSV and that'll be the best. However, if you can't, for example, you are working with like Sura object, you're working with any kind of S4, S3 object that is very difficult to store it in the CSV, you can actually just load it as an RDS project, and then you can able to just send it to other people. Presumably, it's not like a few 100 megabytes. So that will be the best way for people to just load it in. So if you have an object called DAT, you save it as RDS and you send it to other people. When they open it, they'll get that DAT object directly with the same number of dimension, file names, and everything else. So that'll be the best way. And CSV is actually not as ideal. So the second thing is also a short number of codes to reach the error that you have, including the way that how you load the CSV into your environment, because whether you use a different parameters for your row title, your column names, row names, and how do you load in with different encoding, that would actually affects the way of how the data look like. before it reaches the error that you have. So the third thing, of course, is what I said before, showing identical errors to make sure that the error that you see is exactly the same as per other people. Otherwise, that we are just talking about different thing completely. So actually just see an example of this is the code for Satya's Labs Surat's PBMC 3K pre-processing and clustering. I screenshot about two lines of code over there. The overall number of lines about 336 or 380 or somewhere around the line of 300 to 400 lines of code. And if you have an error in one of those lines, don't send me the whole script. I don't know where to look for it. So what you actually need to do is this. Okay, so first of all, save the PBMC object as a RDS. You can use the save RDS command and then just save it as a file and then send a file and these two lines of code to me here and here. Okay, so the first line will load the RDS object into my environment, and the second one will actually just runs the line where you have an error as seen in our case one over there, and you also get output for session info and get works directory. So with just with just 2 lines of code and 2 output, I should be able to understand completely what's the scenario that result in your error, and I should be able to better help you to understand what's the situation. So let's actually go back and look at our codes over here and what is causing the error. So for the case one, because it's an S4 object, you actually need to put double square bracket. Otherwise, single square bracket cannot be used for this situation. Second one is called cannot open the connection because in the work directory /data doesn't exist. There's no such folder as data. So that's why they say cannot open the connection. If you change the work directory for this, it would work. And the third one is because so if you look at the subset n features RNA is more than 2 to the power of 5, there's not so many cells. So there's no situation in this sequencing where there's more than 20,000 cells. So if you just put it smaller than the number of features, this should work well. So it's most likely they put smaller and bigger and they confuse between the two. And lastly, case 4 is because you can actually see another comma over here. So instead of a 2-dimensional subset, this person is doing it as a 3-dimensional subset, and that's why the subsetting doesn't work. But again, if I don't know pbmc.data, this data object, I wouldn't know what's the meaning of 2 and 3 dimension. Like I wouldn't be able to inspect the data object to understand why does it cause the error that it does. So that's basically the whole thing, and I think that's around the minimal reproducer example. I would say thank you for watching, and I hope that you'll be able to do this and send me a better code for the troubleshooting next time. Okay, that's it. Bye.